Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside Procurement, the SmartCube's video forum examining the concepts and ideas that influence procurement and supply chain executives both today and tomorrow. We're back with Patrick Foelck of Roche.
Hey, Omer, thanks for having me back. Maybe a quick recap on who I am and what I do. So after 13, 14 years in consulting, focusing on procurement, supply chain, finance work, I've joined Roche 3 years ago as the head of strategy and transformation for procurement. And about 2 years ago, I also picked up head of indirect procurement role, so looking at all the categories and areas that make up traditional indirect, so professional services, we call it, everything except for R&D and direct materials.
So if we talk about the Roche story and the transformation, the operating model that you're putting in place, how are you sort of defining, and you can take this in whichever way that makes sense for you, well, how are you defining sort of the key objectives, the core drivers of change? I mean, now you've talked about the building blocks, makes perfect sense, right? But how do you sort of see the key objectives and the building blocks? What are you putting in place?
Okay, so I think we've been on a 3 to 4 year journey. We've come from a very immature place, very decentralized, very localized, very traditional sort of sourcing type organization. Over 1.5 years, we've put this together into a global, more centralized function and a more traditional setup, sort of matrix, category, management, regional operations, complemented with shared services and sort of center of excellence operations. That step was big for Roche because it was done for Roche at light speed, right? 1.5 years, 600-700 people, many sort of changed job. We added quite a few, lost quite a few new processes, new ways of working, everything. That was a restructuring journey for us. We then added on a second phase of that journey, which we called sort of our evolution to next generation procurement. And that's driven largely by our people. So we have done this in a very inclusive and engaging way. And we've complemented that whole journey, and I'll come back to your question in a second. We've complemented the journey with our digital transformation. So we are taking our technology completely out. We're bringing new technology in. And that new technology, we are focusing on just the core, right? We're complementing that core with digital assets, so chatbots, robotic solutions, AI, wherever needed, right? We'll complement this with a number of startups that we're working with. We're complementing this with outsourcing some work, and we're complementing this with hybrid solutions. So using our shared service center to work with robots to do certain things, right? Some of this will be integrated into our core. Many of the things will just be connected. We're accepting some sort of breaks in data flow. We're accepting some not perfect technology world, but we will deliver. We deliver tomorrow, not in 10 years, after millions of dollars. I think that's the great development. So that's sort of our journey. And sort of the drivers, I think, for us is that we want to become more customer-centric and not just mean it, right? But do it. And not just say it, but actually really invest in account management teams, in dedicated business partners who, for us, will be impactful because they will carry all our targets. Our balanced scorecard will be on a few sort of account management teams. So customer centricity is one of our key drivers. The second one is flexibility. So the core of our procurement function that sits sort of behind these account management teams will be very flexible, huge pools of people with the right capability, but not necessarily siloed in a category or in a certain supplier market or whatsoever. So we can use them basically as consulting teams to an extent, as a consulting firm functions. And we complement this with people, teams, capabilities that think solution rather than procurement, right? And what I mean with that is a great example I want to give you, right? So COVID hit everyone, And also COVID hit Roche, obviously, and our business. So we needed to quickly move on from, instead of doing business in the marketing space, for example, as we used to in a more digital virtual world. And I got a request, leading professional services marketing, I got a request in the business, hey, can you help us in basically virtualizing, digitalizing some of our launch activities? So we launch a new product in a market. I was, of course we can, right? So I sent 3 of my category managers to the business partner. The business came back to me and said, great that you sent me these experts, but somewhat they gave me sort of conflicting advice, and I need one answer. I don't need sort of 3 sort of supplier market views. And that's when I was really realizing that we have been far too much in sort of our procurement lens and thinking. Business doesn't care about a category strategy. Business doesn't care about a supplier market perspective. The business wants their problem fixed, right? So that third capability is really focusing on finding solutions for the business and really answering the root cause of business problem and actually trying to understand what's behind that business question, right? And offer a solution and building that, like in consulting, building offerings that we quote unquote sell to the business without the business knowing they've got the problem, or actually moving them beyond their question, answering a question they may not even have, right? So that's what we are aiming for: customer centricity, flexibility in the way we deliver, the insights and solutions, and all complemented, underpinned by the automation and self-service journey that we're on.
Okay, there's a lot that I want to pick up there. So okay, so a few thoughts in some of the things that you just said. So when you talk about we need to deliver tomorrow, right? And you mentioned you guys are famous for working with a host of startups and newer organizations testing different things. I'm sure not all of those will be successful, but that's the point. We figure it out. You try it. And if you don't try it, you're never going to know. And so now that's, and then, but the related aspect that you laid down as a marker there or a guide is it has to deliver tomorrow. It can't deliver in 5 or 10 years, right? Because who's going to wait for that? It's that window again we're talking about. What do you think? I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot here, but what do you think that has from an implication perspective in terms of, a lot of traditional tech has been big end-to-end systems. You buy us, we're doing everything for you. You're done, right? And now, partly thanks to the VC money that's flowing in, there's a lot of folks out there that are best of breed, right? Specific, focused, one area. So what's your sort of perspective on that?
So I've been having lots of debates internally, lots of debates in the network, lots of debates with my consulting friends still, right? So I think there are a couple of thoughts here. Number one, back in consulting, I've also made lots of money with selling the big tech, right? That's just beautiful work, right? You promise and then keep on doing it, but it never works out as the business wanted. More complexity, change, work, whatever, right? So it's successful, great work for the consulting firms, for the big tech providers. But I don't think it's necessarily the solution for the client and the customer. I came to realize when I actually joined. But thinking about a big corporation like Roche, this core technology connecting sort of the work that procurement does into financial systems, into ERP, all that stuff, that there's a need for this, right? You need a stable core, but you don't need to take this stable core into every valley, onto every peak of the Swiss mountains, because that will cost you millions. Well, I think, personal opinion, never work and will deliver in years when the requirements have already moved on, right? So for me, it's about defining and finding that stable core and push this to the minimum of, number one, what the partner you're working with can deliver, can do. And number two, is doable in a decent amount of time. And I mean months, right? 12, 18, 24 months max. Doable in terms of integrating it and sort of implementing it across the majority of the sites or scope that you have. And then the real question is, how much compromise in terms of data security, integration, connection, and whatever I can afford by plugging stuff on top.
Yeah.
Right. And that answers your question. So I think it's not one suite do everything. It's also not best of breed, not for big corporations like Roche. It's a balance, right? And I think we need to think in terms of now taking the entire corporate world out there quickly. I think we need to think in archetypes or personas or whatsoever, right? So some small companies, I think they can do best of breed, right? Or some even mid-sized companies, or some super very low complexity companies. Go for it, definitely. It makes sense, right? Some big companies like Roche, they need this hybrid. But I don't certainly believe anymore in this one suite, one size fits all type thing, because I think it will just not deliver. That's my personal opinion. And that's the sort of digital strategy that we have developed here and that we are pursuing, right? Stable core, good functioning core technology, and plug stuff on top that we either connect or integrate or just leave standalone to the side, right?
Yeah.
Good example is you can think about the whole portfolio management, resource management stuff that we need with running an operations like I described. I can now spend 2 years working with my, or more probably, with my core technology provider, building something that's beautifully integrated. But in 2 years, probably the thing will be dead, right? Because the organization will not have worked without it. So now get something in, work with a startup, put it to the side as a standalone, over time develop understanding on where do I need to connect it, start to connect it, and if there's a need for integration, I may integrate it at some point. Right? For now, I'm okay with loading data down and up from time to time, right? So that's the thinking, the mindset you need in order to be successful in this, as you suggested, huge ecosystem out there. And actually success means start to capitalize and leverage it. And I think one final thought on where you may be heading with this. I think many people are concerned about best of breed and don't even consider best of breed because it's super difficult, right? You can listen to the big consulting firms who promise you the world and these suite providers and say, we can do it all for you. Yes, they can, but it takes forever and costs you a lot of money. But then it's them, right? They promised me, I'll pay them, they will do it eventually, right? Or it's this best of breed where you deal with 20 or whatever startups and it's up to you to do. And that's what many people say, I go this way rather than that way, right?
Hard work.
It's hard work, and it's tough, but I think it's that compromise, that balance.
Yeah. And I think, so 100% agree. I think it's a hybrid approach. I think the results and the innovation will point the way as to where companies tend to evolve. And I agree with you. I think it depends. If you're a $100 million company, you have a different set of issues than if you are a 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 billion company. You have a whole different set of issues. So I agree with you. I think it's results lead the way. When we talk about being solutions-led, how do you think about the role of, so the term that we like to use is, in order to move towards that vision, one has to be insight-led, right? And so you have to be armed with the right data, the right analytics, the right insights. How do you see that playing in, and what role has that played in the thinking at Roche and your organization?
So I'm a big believer in the network that we have, that I have. I'm also a big believer in working with partners, right? I think coming back to what I said at the very beginning, in terms of procurement is a great function because it's so well connected. It sees so much data. It's like in the center of so many things. And we need to take benefit of this. We need to leverage, capitalize on it, on the work that we do, not only for our customers and clients, but also on what we do to us, right? Yeah. So I think we need to work with partners. We need to get the insight. We need to get the visibility. We need to ask people that know, right? And I'm a big fan of sharing too. I speak to many people. I present to many leadership teams just to spread, I think, some of that thinking, some of that experience, right? I think that's important. So yes, totally agree. From two dimensions here. Number one, leverage that network, leverage companies, partners who can give you some insights, some advice, and not sort of just ask those that try to sell you a product, right? I think that's important. And then also think about the make versus buy, right? So where do you need to build own capability to make the connection back to talent a little bit? And where do you buy capability? Or even better these days, I think, where do you buy an outcome? So to make it very concrete in terms of business problems that we have here, but it's the same for procurement, right? And that also connects it to my solution thinking that I want from procurement for the business. The business comes to me today and asks me, hey, we are building a new lab building. Can you help me source that building, all the infrastructure, everything, right? So I could say yes and do a good procurement job, but I don't want to say yes, right? I can take it further. I can manage demand and challenge and blah, blah, and specs, great, even better. But I think if we think solution, we can think about, hey, business, let's think about not only make versus buy in terms of renting the asset and managing the asset, something that I can support the business with and actually want to run for them, but actually, can we buy that outcome? Rather than us thinking about investing in a lab, into the technology, or buying that capacity somewhere on the market. No. Do I need to do this lab test, or can I just buy the outcome of the hypothesis I'm trying to prove, right? And that connects me back to your question in terms of procurement. Do I need to develop some of that thinking myself, or can I come to you or elsewhere and say, look, I've got this problem here. Have you seen this elsewhere? Can you give me the answer? Or here's some data, right? I need an answer from that data rather than investing in my own sort of data analytics capability. And that thinking, that mindset, I think we need to develop, because that is so vital for our survival and for our value contribution in the future, really thinking outcome and thinking solution rather than answering a question. Because that's I'm not saying it's dumb, but it's done.
Yeah, it's an age-old problem. We want to invent everything, right? If we don't do it, who's going to do it better, right? Yep. The reality is there are people who spend their whole lives doing that one thing, and they can do it. And there are other situations where they can't, because there are particular situations here. I agree. I think that balance view is critical.
But I think that's what we need to take people, and sorry to interrupt, that's what we need to take people on a journey, right? So when we introduce this very flexible way of working, someone who's been in, just making it up, right? A temp labor sourcing guy in Switzerland for the last 10 years, right? He or she knows the market, clearly knows the rates, knows everything, right? But is this the greatest value for procurement, or even in this case, Roche, our business? No. I think I want to leverage the capability that person has to apply it to similar or even broader categories or actual business problems, right? And I think that's where the value is. And that's we need to get people comfortable also in our transformation that we are in, by not saying just because your role title is, or your role actually significantly changes from being the sourcing manager in Switzerland for temp labor for this business unit. No, right? That's not the future. We still need you, and we definitely want you. But I think the career opportunity for you and the development opportunity for you is far greater, plus the flexibility opportunity for me as the functional leader is far greater, and deploying you with the capability you have rather than just focus on your experience.
Yeah. Okay. So I also know we're coming up on time, but I want to just ask you three hopefully short questions. One related to exactly that point, which is talent, right? In order for that vision to be successful, in order for individuals to stop being just category focused, to be problem solvers, right? That's really what you're saying. Is think broadly and be a problem solver and think creatively about it. You need good people to be able to do that. How are you that's, and I'll tell you, and I'm sure you're living this, all I'm hearing today is how hard it is to get good people, right? And that's just to do quote unquote regular jobs. When you're on a transformative agenda like you are, it's even harder because those folks are hard to find. How are you managing that?
I mean, it's super challenging, no question. But sort of three very quick points for me. Number one, you need to engage your people. And the sort of second phase of our transformation was all driven by our people, right? They have developed many of the ideas. Certainly, we've injected some thoughts and we've steered and guided, but we let the organization develop some of that thinking that I just presented, right? So there was a lot of engagement and adoption. And through that, second point, we let them experience what a different way of working, what a different sort of procurement could be. An experience is much better than being told you shouldn't drive too fast because it's dangerous. Once you experience how dangerous driving fast is, you never drive fast, right? Or too fast. And number three, I think, is investing in upskilling, right? I don't think that anyone can expect that we swap half the organization out. Why would we? And we shouldn't, right? Because you can't find the talent, and the people you have are good. They may not be doing things the way you want them to, but you can largely train them, right? So we're investing a lot of non-technical, non-traditional training, capability development, and largely based this on experience, on interaction, rather than sort of classroom. So I think these were my three responses, or three answers to the question. I think it's hard, definitely, but I think engage, right? Let them experience and invest, right? Because you will not be able to find a few hundred people in the market anyway.
Absolutely. That has to be the right way to go. All right, two final questions, since I know we're coming up on time. Very quickly, what's your perspective on AI in procurement? And you can answer that in any way you like. I mean, there's a lot of talk about AI and where it's particularly going. There's a lot of talk about AI within procurement and its impact specifically. What's your point of view on there?
So 2 dimensions I want to take this. Number one, AI and digital can kill the traditional procurement organization because it will just be better, easier to do. And I can easily take the traditional procurement work outside, right, for a business and a corporation. That's one dimension, threatening. If we as a function, however, respond and start to really leverage and capitalize artificial intelligence and all the digital stuff, I think you can create a function that truly delivers on some of the value aspects I mentioned before and make it a true enabler of your journey and enable you to move on, right? Sort of what you've done in the past, you bring digital and technology in, that allows you, back to my point earlier, to take that capacity, upskill that capacity, develop that capability, and move on to where you should be to survive as a function.
I think there's so much that we're seeing play out here. It's going to be really exciting to see where that AI goes in the next several years. All right, one last question for you. If you're speaking to an executive who wants to embark on a similar type of an ambitious transformation, similar to what Roche is trying to do right now, is working through right now, what would be 1 or 2 pieces of advice that you would give them?
The first ask, not advice, is consider everything that procurement could do for you, right? And the business. Don't limit us to be the savings machine, right? Because there's so much more we can do. Back to my lab example, right? I can now spend a lot of time sourcing the massive lab building for the business and save some money. But actually, I can help and work with the business to become a true decision support advisor and whatever it is to take the need for that building away, or maybe spend a little bit more money, but create massive more outcome and output in terms of growth, revenue, whatsoever it is, right? And that, I think we need to be allowed to do, right? I think point 2 is invest in procurement, not only in terms of money or technology or whatsoever, but I think also in terms of capability and giving them, and that's the investment, I think greater scope, right? Allowing them to truly work with the business on aspects that they do today, giving us greater responsibility to deliver. And I think that And there are many, many more things I don't talk about, but I think these are the two sort of fundamental points I would want to discuss with an executive.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Patrick, we could talk for hours on this. I mean, I think it's an exciting space. I think there is so much that's happening in the procurement world, and particularly what you're pushing forward with at Roche. I think it's super exciting. We're all excited to see how that transformation goes, and let's do a check-in in a year and see kind of how things are going.
Super excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you.